All right, and welcome to the Weekly Jargon. I am Jose Rodriguez.
Rohi Zachariah.
And today, Rohi, we have a special guest, Valerie. She'll introduce herself here in a minute. But I'm going to let you take over on this one, Rohi. Tell us what the show's about today and give us some highlights.
Well, I think some of us are just confused in this world, and I think Valerie's going to help clear some of that up. But, I've known her for quite a while now and heard a lot of her story about some of the things going on in the women's prisons, and I think it was appropriate to bring her on to kind of spill the beans, I guess, if that's how you want to best put it, you know. But if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, Valerie, and kind of tell us a little bit, I mean, how long have you been with the prison systems? And
Yes, I started in 2007, and I left at the end of 2022, so giving me a little over 15 years in the department. When I started off, of course I was gung-ho, I was excited, and then as time went on, it was like, oh, okay, and also a lot of it had to do with the changes in, laws and, policies and all that stuff, but yeah.
So give me an idea, because I mean, I know with the women's prisons in our backyard essentially, but
Yes.
who does it house, or who does it kind of serve to kind of get an understanding of,
Yes.
What do we see in there?
So when I initially started, we had a full-on death row there at the prison, and it's always has had levels 1 through 4, which is level 1 is minimum security all the way to maximum security, and of course the death row. The difference between the women and the men is that the women at the prison, both prisons, they house them all together, all levels together.
Okay.
And I'm not sure why they decided to do that.
Is that unique to us, I guess? Is that?
You know what? It's unique to women
Okay.
for some reason, and we always have a saying that it's like they have a Title 15. There's a Title 15, which is the California Code of Regulations. I think if I'm saying that correctly.
Okay.
And but it only pertains mostly to men for some reason, and you would think that would be like for everybody, and for the women they do it different, and I think that's because of that brings a lot of confusion.
Okay.
So.
Do you see? I mean, like if maybe the safety risk do you see with any of that? Where
Exactly,
like
yes.
do women just get along better than men? I mean, I always feel like in the real world that's the opposite. Guys get they get along real well.
Yeah, no. So when I first started, we were like I want to say we were over 4,000 inmates, around there, and the capacity was only for just under 2,000. So the inmates were like in the day rooms. They had bunk beds like everywhere. Wherever they could fit inmates, they had them. It was ridiculous. But then, the weird thing about that is because, they're all levels, they're all mixed. A lot of them liked to be out in the day room where they were constantly being supervised because they felt safe. And, the women right now, there can be up to 8 inmates in a room. And they're all levels, so a minimum level inmate, could have only 3 years, for, GTA, or let's just say, and then you could have a death row inmate in there, and maybe a lifer, and somebody that's only going to be there for 5 years, and so you could only imagine like the extortion that will happen, or the bullying, that happens, and it does happen a lot because these inmates that are never gonna go home have nothing to lose. They don't care. And these women they want to go home. They have a date, a parole date. So they're like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to have to listen to you so I can make it out.
Wow.
And then there's no out for them.
So Valerie, for us that don't really understand how the correction systems work in California, this specific facility that we're talking about, and we can reference CCWF. Are these inmates that have created crimes or are sentenced from the state of California? This is a state penitentiary, right?
Correct.
Or state correction. So
Yes.
that means inmates from the state or crimes created in the state, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so these aren't inmates being transferred from different states and what have you.
No.
Unless they created a crime, California, maybe they're going to get...
Correct.
Okay, good.
Yeah, like that Rihanna case.
Yes, yes, okay.
She came from Florida, went to go shoot up at Rihanna's house. So she'll be going to our prison.
I see.
She's
Okay,
from
good.
Florida,
And
so
in this way, we understand what kind of population we have. Now, question for you, and not so much in the demographics, but what are we seeing there? Like when you say from lifers to death row to all that, like, can you tell us kind of like the makeup of what you see there? What's the majority of makeup? And when I say demographics, we know they're all women, right? Well, at least
I was gonna say.
up until this SB 132.
132,
But what do you see the makeup like? Is it mainly a lot of
Well, it's
Latino,
predominantly
brown?
women,
Okay.
right? And see, and I just want to touch real quick and go a little backwards, is that at the men's prison, the security levels are segregated. And the reason why they're segregated is because of, for safety reasons, right? Safety and security reasons. There's more staff, there's more monitoring, there's a lot more controlled movement. And that makes a big difference when you have inmates that are being controlled, and at CCWF, they always call it like Prisonland or Disneyland because it's just like a free-for-all. And so leading into the demographics there, we have, everything there from women who want to be men who want to be women, and then you have the, of course, your feminine women, you have, your small crime all the way to your serial killers there, and they're all just mixed together. It's almost like putting, and I hate to say it like this, but it's just like you wouldn't open the gates to a zoo, but yet they're doing it to these women, and that's the problem. That's a huge issue.
Wow. So, and again, to the question, is the demographics that you see there as far as population, though, do you see predominantly a certain gender? I mean, I'm not saying,
Yes.
let's just say we know the gender.
Right.
But I mean by demographic, meaning is it brown, Latino, is it
Oh, I
white?
see.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. Yes, I would say it's predominantly blacks, and then we have the Hispanics or, I don't know if they're Mexicans or what, but then you have the whites, and then you have a little bit of Asians. So, but with the, like I was saying, with the men coming in, that's also a mixture too. And so with the men, go back to the men's, there's, it's all gangs. It's a lot of gangs in the men's, and that's how a lot of things are. There's different politics, and then they go to the women's, and so now they still have that gang mentality, and so that kind of influences, the women also. And so, they're all different races as well.
Yeah, and Rohi, if you don't mind.
Yes, you're talking about. Let's talk about the transition, since that's kind of the.
Yeah.
So how long has the SB 132 kind of been in effect, and when did you see a huge push in the beginning, or was it a slow kind of people tiptoeing into this transition to getting into there?
When I had first, a little early on in my career, there was a man that had transferred in, and I can't remember his name, but he was a woman. They classified him a woman because he had, mutilated himself.
Okay.
And so they sent him to the women's prison, but then at that time they segregated him. They kept him in isolation, and then they, I guess they made the decision to go ahead and let him roam free with inmates.
Wow.
And he ended up getting jumped. They jumped him. They beat him, and I don't know to what extent.
Yeah.
But then they're like, okay, we can't have him out here, so they put him back in isolation. And then I think he did some stuff to where, I don't know if he assaulted inmates or staff or both, but they sent him back to a men's prison, or I'm not sure if he retired, parole. And so then fast forward to 2021, or I want to say 2020, but I guess it's 2021, they started bringing him in, and again, they kept him isolated, and it was almost like to ease them into the population. But we had the pandemic at that time, so we were dealing with, are we gonna die? And then we had, these inmates coming in. It was almost like a sneaky move. That's what it seemed like, because we were so concerned about the pandemic and then, you brought in these inmates. And I remember I was working building an honor dorm at that time, and the inmates were running to us officers like, what are we gonna do? I'm nervous, you know, I was raped, or, you know, men trigger me, like, they were just like genuinely terrified. And I understand, because I didn't want to work, I've never wanted to work at a men's prison just because of the danger of it. So I understood, you know, where they were coming from. And
So
then,
did this bill put in kind of like, you know, because I know when you look at it on the surface level, they're supposed to be like, you know, you can't just say I'm a woman. Like, you know, there's steps you
Yes.
have to do, you know, you have to, you know, go through.
yeah,
So, I mean, do you
exactly.
think that is that being held to that level? And so, I mean, what is the process? What do you, I mean,
Right.
I come in, I'm in the men's prison.
Right.
I want to now identify, like,
Right.
what does a person have to go through before they can successfully transition
Yeah, I'm glad
to
that
women?
you asked that question, because before the SB 132, they did allow the men to come over, but they had to be, you know, had the surgery down there,
Okay.
you know?
Okay.
And so, and then they, you know, they knew that, okay, they're a woman, you know? But now, after SB 132, they could have everything, you know, no transition, no change, no hormone therapy, no nothing, you know, full on beard. And that's what I was gonna do. I was
Okay.
gonna show you.
Yeah, I want to bring that up
picture
because I mean
photo coming
I
up.
guess that's, you know, somebody from on the outside. I guess that is maybe what I'm getting misled by is I'm assuming somebody I might even know as a
Right.
man coming in and
Yes.
okay, maybe they're assimilating somewhat well, but a full bearded guy,
Right.
just as simple as just to say, hey, you know what, today I'm gonna be a woman, and maybe going through some minor steps to affirm that.
And
you know.
yeah, and once SB 132, that all that went away, and it was just kind of like open the floodgates to whoever wanted to claim. And see, here's
Yeah.
the thing: is that at the men's, the men don't take too kindly to inmates who are child molesters, who are
Yeah.
rapists, any types of those guys, and they will kill them if they can, and they have. But they try to separate those types of inmates from the general population. They used to have a SNY, which is I can't even remember what it stands for right now.
It's okay.
But just basically, those inmates who were child molesters and rapists, they would go to that area or those prisons or those yards. But now they have another scapegoat, which is the women's prisons.
Got it.
And so there's all they have to say is, I'm a woman, I identify as a woman, and that's it. I mean, there's some criteria, which is like they can't be like, you know, a murderer, like, you know, they
Okay.
murder their cellmates or constantly battering their cellmates. I mean, there's some criteria, but nothing to the extent of, you know, like, are you, like, where's the history showing that
Yeah.
you identify as a woman,
Yeah.
you know? And that's where the issue lies, you know?
Okay.
And
And I know, you know, that it was in the news about, you know, the women getting pregnant now.
yeah.
You know, and can you kind of talk a little bit about like
Yes.
what does that even look like now? I mean, an inmate is getting, you know, pregnant from another inmate.
Yeah, and I remember when that it's his name is Jermaine Carroll.
Okay.
And I remember when he went onto the yard when I was working on the yard, and I mean, I personally didn't have a problem with him, but you know, I didn't know what was going on inside the cell, you know. And I remember the inmates were like complaining, and I remember he was saying that he had to have a roommate or he had to have a cellmate, and so basically the inmates didn't want to live with him. I remember that because they came and told me. And I was like, well, I mean, you have to put in a 602, go talk to the sergeant, go do what you got to do. I mean, I'm a yard cop, I can't really do much, you know, unless something happens out here, you know. But apparently they did, and some of the inmates that did go and complain, they got in trouble or they got retaliated against, and they're like, well, hey, if you don't feel comfortable or you're refusing to live with them, and that's an issue. So that inmate, if they don't want to live with a man, they
Yeah.
would have to go to ADSEG. They're gonna get isolated. They're gonna get pretty much punished,
Yeah. Okay.
and they're gonna get in trouble. So, but yeah, he apparently has been charged. I was reading an article, and now I can't really find it, of course.
Yeah.
And he was charged of raping 3 women.
Okay.
there at CCWF, and it resulted, as far as the report goes, is there was 2 inmates that were pregnant, and one of them was successful, one of them did have the baby. So, and now there's lawsuits pending because of it.
So
You know?
let me kind of ask, I mean, just a crazier question is it forbidden in the prison to have sex with another inmate?
Yes, it is.
So there's supposed to be this you can't-
Celibacy.
celibacy
Well,
to
you
some degree.
know,
You guys are building priests and nuns, apparently, right?
Right. I mean, and that's another thing.
So, I
It's
mean, that
like,
seems difficult. I mean, just
what
on
do
a
you-
psychological level, right? Like you have to be around people who can't.
right, you can't do
But
anything.
obviously, it's happening. I
And
mean,
see, and that, it happens among the women.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, there's countless write-ups, you know, of them, you know, doing things with each other.
Yeah.
So, of course, what do you think when a man comes into the picture, that's not going to happen? I mean, some of them have been there for years and years, you know, maybe they want that, you know?
Yeah.
And so, just despite that, you would think that that alone would keep them separated, you know, but, yeah, I don't know, it just boggles my mind. But,
Yeah, what I want to do is I just kind of want to give some context of those that are joining in and listening into what we're talking about, right? California SB 132. And what we're stepping into is one of California's most complex and controversial criminal justice reforms, right?
Yeah.
And known as SB 132, also known as the Transgender Respect, Agency, and Dignity Act. And I know it has all those words in there
Yeah.
because you want to show respect, you want to show dignity, and again, you want to be able to identify when someone is a transgender. How do you navigate through that? And more importantly, how do people that work in those facilities that probably come from a different background, don't really necessarily adhere to that,
Yeah.
maybe personally, but yet have to come to an institution where this policy is now enacted, and then you have to kind of navigate around it, right?
Yeah.
And I understand logically there's going to be, you know, desires, right? And I think that when you bring in a man that identifies as a woman, but yet does not go through, you said there's no treatment, there's no hormones, there's nothing really to help that person transition, which I think it's crazy. But
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
you know, not knowing their situation, you know, I got to be sensitive on that.
Yeah.
But again, not having these supplemental, you know, transitioning hormones and what have you, then you're more likely to fall back sometimes to your ideal biological, you know,
Yeah.
testosterone levels of saying, you know, hey, I'm here with the woman in a cell. I mean, what do you expect,
Yeah.
right? And how does that affect people that actually work there, that have to evaluate, that are always constantly on top of that? And I think
Right.
you, Valerie, bring a really good story because it really showcases what's really taking place. Is this a
Yes.
failed policy, or is this policy an introduction of future policies that are trying to say, hey, our prison system is antiquated.
Yeah.
Our prison system is I mean, we've done this for, I don't know, hundreds, if not thousands of years. I mean, should we change it? And is this change going to bring resistance? And is this part of what we're seeing?
So I mean, I think it's like short of building a new jail, but then, you know, for what population? Like, how do you identify it? Because I mean, like you said in the beginning, how they're bringing them in and they're kind of isolating them. It's almost like, okay, we made a sub jail for this
Right.
to kind of protect them again, or protect, you know, as a whole. But then you can't because you guys are stuffed to the brim.
right.
So you kind of have to, you know, integrate everybody. But, you know, it's, I think, you know, in following her page, you know, it also seems like for them as employees, it becomes difficult because it's, you know, just like we have in the real world where I misgender you or identify you now, and all of a sudden it's like, it's, you know, it's the worst thing you could ever
Yeah.
do. But in this case, it's difficult because it's like, well, wait a minute. How do I know what you are? And her job is on the line now, and she could, you know,
Her life is on the line.
yeah,
Well,
everything, you know.
that happened to me because before I was even aware that they were allowing that. So
Yeah.
we'll go back. So a couple things I want to touch on. They do give the inmates condoms, almost as so they acknowledge that
Yeah.
they will be, you know, having sex basically, and those are, you know, they just come and ask for a condom and they give it to them. It's like
Okay.
candy, you know, here you go. But they also have, and this is where another issue lies, is it's on the taxpayers' dime, is that they provide a lot of procedures to these transgenders. So if they want to have hormone therapy because they want to sound more feminine, they're going to give them that. If they want to have breast implants, they're going to give them that. If they want to have, you know, a new vagina, they want to remove their genitals and replace it with a vagina, now they get to do that. And those surgeries are very expensive, you know, and it's free of charge, you know. So they even have had, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, so earlier I had brought those comments, and I understood that there isn't.
No, yeah,
So there is.
There is, yes.
You're saying that taxpayers, or in this case, the institutions will pay for these
Yes.
transitions,
Yes.
for medical procedures,
Yes.
for hormone therapy, for all this.
yep.
Okay, I wasn't
Yeah.
aware of that.
No, it's okay. I just didn't want to interrupt you, so that's why
No,
I
no,
was like,
please.
let me try to remember these things.
Okay,
So, but so far, this is as of 2023. The prison, or CCR, I should say, has paid over $4 million for all these procedures. So that's and that's in 2023. So I can only imagine, you know, how much or what the cost is to date. And they said about, I want to say 200 transgenders are pending to come in. I'm not sure of the number, but that's still a lot. You know, close to 1,000 have requested, but not all of them are getting approved. But yeah, I mean, imagine another 1,000 transgenders, and you know, mind you, they're men, so they were at a maximum security prison. Now they're going to a women's prison where they're free to roam wherever they want. And, you know, and as we see, that's a problem because, you know, some of them are brave. And that's of what we know.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that there's inmates in there that are not saying anything because they're terrified. You know, that could still be happening right now, and we don't even know that.
yeah, and I think in prisons you have gang politics that
Yeah.
typically start taking, or they start making their way through the mainstream, and mainly in maybe in women's population. You know, they may be coming from this side and saying, you know what, let's go in there, infiltrate.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
this is what we want you to do. And essentially, you're governing, or you're overlooking not only two prisons, but you're looking a women's prison, and women that are there. I think even though they're lifers, what have you, they're there to get institutionalized, rehabbed.
Right.
But it's hard to do that when you add another layer of complexity, which is
Exactly,
the
yes.
transgender world, right? And I can see how that can become a problem. Now, what drove SB 132? What was going on in our prison systems that California decided to say, we need this in order for us to facilitate a better way of accommodating this up and coming or growing demographic of people that are identifying as different genders?
Right. I'm not exactly sure because at the women's prison, I know that there was, some women who were saying that they identified as men.
Yeah.
And, even they were giving them hormone therapy before this SB 132. And I mean, I still I would say ma'am or what, and they'd be like, don't call me ma'am. And I'm like, well, you're at a women's prison, CCWF, so I'm calling you ma'am. And, but of course, that's me being, I guess, ignorant to all of that information or how all that works at the time. And then fast forward, it's like, okay, no, you have to call them a man because they identify as a man, even though they're at a women's prison. And so it's like, okay, now I gotta call them inmate. But okay, I got sidetracked.
Yeah.
What were you saying?
No, but that's good because I think what you said there is that, are you seeing that more common in the women's prison than you are, for example, women that identify as men?
Right.
Are they being transferred over? Because I find
That's a good point.
a bit more dangerous for a woman to, and not to say that, I think just the biological sense,
for sure.
the structure, men for some reason are typically, their masses are bigger, stronger. I'm not, look, we can go through this.
I'm okay with that. I don't get offended.
We can go through
I'm not going to get offended.
And the reason why I see it is because we see it a lot in the athletic world, and not to say that that isn't the case, but biologically, I'm just going off
And
of
it's true.
science,
That's a
right?
good point, because if you think about it, that right there should be like, okay, none of these women are really going to be able to overtake a man. So why would they put them there? Because they're defenseless in a sense, because they're kind of vulnerable in a sense in comparison to a man.
Yeah.
But I do know, I will say this real quick, is that there are a lot of men at the men's prisons who are, like I guess gay, So I'm sure that might have initiated the reason why they started this SB 132. But Senator Weiner is the one that initiated that, and he fought for that. And yeah, this is where we're at.
Yeah, so I wonder where that's at now. I mean, when you
Well,
said,
right now there is I don't know if you heard about it, but DOJ has, or President Trump has initiated or a probe into the SB 132. Well, not necessarily SB 132, because it's in the United States where the men are going into women's prisons, like Maine, and I'm not sure. There's a couple other states, and they're like, why did this even begin, and what's going on? So it's like.
so it's being looked at and observed.
Yes.
And I think, essentially whenever you have anything new coming into or introduced, you're going to have a lot of loopholes. You're going to have a lot of
For sure.
different opposing sides. Is it something good for society? I mean, do you allow it to kind of transition? There's resistance involved in it. But I mean,
Right.
what you're trying to do, the goodness in what you're trying to do, does it really materialize, or is it another failed policy with ideology, right?
Right.
And I think a lot of the times I think people mean to do well because they
Right.
see a need in the prison system of reform. And essentially when these ideas and or laws come into place, you're not looking out 20, 30, 40 years down the road. You're looking
Yes.
at current situation
Right.
that's taking place right now.
Right.
So these policies are quick to react, and then boom, all of a sudden you have everybody just on the aftermath. And I think this is kind of what we're talking about today
Right.
is SB 132. In your eyes, Valerie, I think you've kind of said it is kind of like a failed policy because it doesn't really help the inmate population, and also it doesn't help the people that are surrounded in it,
Right.
right? That are working.
This is the way I see it. This law, SB 132, they're saying, okay, you need to respect how I feel, respect what I identify as. However, they're putting their respects and their feelings over the women. And when the women are feeling unsafe and they are not feeling respected, because if you think about it, I mean, in some situations, like you're not a woman, you're a man. Regardless, you could do all the surgeries that you want, you're still a man. I mean, and I know that's different when it comes to sex opposed to identifying with gender, but at the same time, you're never going to be able to change your sex. So, but the women are having to just deal with it and suck it up, and I think what people don't understand is that any one of us could be an inmate.
Sure.
I mean, it just takes a split second to make a bad decision and become an inmate, and then you could be a prisoner, or your family could be a prisoner, and then a lot of times what happens in the prisons bleeds out into our, outside into society, and I think that's what's going on here, and you see that, people like, hey, oh, hi, ma'am, oh, I'm not a ma'am, and it's like, well, you look like a ma'am, sorry, and then it's like, okay, well, I'm offended. So it's like, we need to stop catering to people's feelings and just like, let's go back to the facts and reality and basics.
In being, let's assume we can't really, amend the law or change it in any way. Does the prison, because I know you talked about there's a lot of controls that kind of go on there. Do you see in your mind a certain point of maybe there's enough population of these transitioned people into the women's prison where you can say, okay, well, now we can this is your time to eat. Now, so we don't have to have some of that mixing. Is that even feasible?
It is feasible, very
Okay.
feasible, because there's no need for them to send them to the women's prisons. There's yard closures at men's prisons where they could accommodate them there. then they really need to segregate the women too, regardless, because it's gone violent, so that's separate from the SB 132. And so, and that's why the women's prison is such a mess, is because there's so many, layers, that has created a problem. But yeah, they essentially could.
So, I mean, so if
segregate
somebody
them.
out there is listening and was to pass a better Senate bill, would it be asking them to look at the women's prison and some of that segregation, since we have to kind of keep 132?
Yes.
Would that maybe be a
Yeah.
patch to some degree of that, to just, if we kind of had like the women's and the men's?
Right. And I feel like, I think that if they don't, for some reason, are not able to repeal SB 132, then I feel like, yes, that would be the next option, is to segregate them and keep them separate from the women. I mean, even if they do have, a vagina now all of a sudden, I still think that they should still be segregated, because at the end of the day, their sex is still male and they need to be segregated.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that would be the best solution. But,
Yeah, no, that's definitely interesting. And Valerie, thank you. I appreciate you sharing a lot of this information, because for a lot of people, we're not really focused on what's taking place in these institutions.
Yeah.
I think, like you said, one moment you're in society as a civilian, and before you know it, you're caught up in the prison system, or you have a relative or someone that that's in the prison system. But like you said, it leaks out, and we see that because in many cases, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about issues that are going on with their society. I mean, I think Rohi and I, as council members, I mean, this may be outside of our jurisdiction, but I think for us, we're always thinking of how do we make our communities better? How do we try to improve our communities?
Right.
And we don't juggle with SB 132 here. That's not really our jurisdiction. But our deal is to try to make sure that we provide services that are essential to our residents. But it's hard to provide those services if, in fact, we're fighting with other outside forces that leak into our community sometimes, right? And I'm not saying SB 132, it's not just SB 132.
No, it's not.
We have some issues going on with reentry again, releasing prisoners, right? And again, and I understand the notion behind it is give them an opportunity. Maybe institutionalizing them has to be reevaluated.
Yes.
And maybe the way we look at prisons, right? And I mean, we look at it for thousands of years, and this is the way it is. Humans evolved. Humans are very smart.
Yes.
And they'll find ways in politics within their organizations to find ways to grab an advantage of something, right? And this is a prime example. SB 132 now allows me to say that I'm think about, and I look at it in the tax law. I'll use an analogy, right? Well, I can file married filing joint. I can file married filing single, head of household, or I can say that I'm not married. And you get, there's a lot of loopholes people try to take. And I see it because I'm in the tax world. I see it, okay, even though you may know or think that's not what they're coming to tell you, they're telling me to tell you something different, right? And you can use that in many different ways in today's laws and policies. People are smart enough to find loopholes, and they will do it.
And this is
the intention of it is to help this group of people, but yet other people will find a loophole and say this is lucrative. We can do something big here. And I think it's kind of leaked over into that where you see it now, right? And that's what you're kind of
And I think one of the things, like I was telling Rohi, is that accountability. If people are accountable for their actions and their decisions and everything that, like as far as policies, failed policies, then I think a lot of these things would be at least not prevented, but at least it would be minimal, And that's another thing with CCWF, is that there's a lot of policies that they do, and this is one of them, SB 132. Had they just kept them segregated, you're still at a women's prison, but you're still, you're segregated. And I guess, I'm sure there's laws and what have you that they have to do, and there's decisions that they have to make. But a lot of these things fall into lawsuits. And I think that's one of the biggest issues of why they're not making decisions, but they have to look at the totality of the circumstances and look at everybody involved and not just a small group.
Very good. Wow.
Well, it certainly highlights a lot of the SB 132 systems, right? It's broken, right? We know that
Yes.
because you've clearly identified that. Rohi, I think, I mean, we've talked about certain policies. I mean, this is another, I mean, do we say it's a failed policy? Do we give it a failed, a thumbs down, thumbs up, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, the best thing to understand is the attempt there was for good. At least we want to hope so. But I think in general, laws always miss. You know, they always miss. But it doesn't mean you just say we miss and that you leave it alone. Like
Right.
there's got to be, you know, ratification, changes.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, again, always come from the gun world. That's what always happens. They pass a law.
Right. True.
Oh, you know what? That's not what we were going for. We need to adjust it. And every couple of years they'll adjust it. You know, I think this one just is probably maybe that, looking at all the loopholes that have kind of come in and say,
Yes.
hey, how do we fix this? And, you know, or just get rid of it altogether. But I don't know if it's
Yeah.
too far to do that, you know? I
Yeah,
don't know.
and that's the thing is like, we're gonna chase bad policies sometimes with more bad policies.
Exactly.
And then not only that,
Yeah.
we're gonna chase it with money.
Yeah.
And here's the thing about when I say money, and sometimes chasing bad policies with money, it's good and bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good in that it creates jobs, government
Right.
jobs, right? It
Yes.
creates more jobs, it expands the economy a bit more
Right.
because people have more money to spend. And that part of it, you know, I'm not gonna disagree completely, but
Yes.
what does it do for society, right? Because we're chasing bad policies with new money, and a lot of the times we get where we're at today.
Yes.
Is that we're continuously, you know, raising that debt ceiling. I mean, this is federally because I
Yeah.
can't say California. California just happens to be one of those leading states that's always innovating, always trying something new, and it's a hit and miss, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But you have states like California, like New York, that are, you know, pro rights, pro this,
Yeah.
pro that. And you invite people in, but then you start saying, well, maybe this isn't what I wanted. And then you start seeing the exodus and you start people start talking about, you know, leaving California, boom,
Yeah.
boom. And that's a whole different discussion, right?
Yes.
But I couldn't tell you that I haven't lived in different states, but I do enjoy living where I'm at.
Yeah,
It's
I do
becoming
too, yes.
harder
Yes.
for us here in the valley, especially when it comes to affordability.
Right.
But I mean, policies like this certainly don't help because at the end of the day, it's California residents and California people that are paying for this.
Exactly.
And and I'm glad you highlighted that. So
Yes.
with that, let's go ahead and thank Valerie. Valerie,
Yeah,
any
thank
last
you.
comments that you want to give out? What can you tell us, or what can you tell the people out there that probably don't know about this to maybe learn a bit more about it, be more active? What would you say?
Yes, I would say that votes have consequences. So, you know, vote accordingly. You know, we have elections coming up, and that means a lot, you know, because we have legislators or we have, you know, people that you want, if you want them to, you know, make good decisions, then you have to vote accordingly.
Well, I'm glad you said that because I'm going to segue. That we have a council member here
Yeah.
that's running for election here in November, and I think you said it best. Vote, you know, and be smart about your vote.
Yes.
Be smart about the people that you bring into that make policies. And what you want is you want people with good balance and understand not only the
Yes.
business world, but also understand what's taking place in their communities.
Right.
And who other than our very own council member and esteemed member,
write a
Council Member
check down.
Sakurai. That's right. Don't forget that I'm running for election too. So, but appreciate that, Valerie. Rohi, any last?
No, I think it's brave of you to come on, Valerie. I know there's always, especially with the kind of people we're talking about, there's a
Yes.
danger. So I appreciate you coming on and talking about it, and especially being a voice for some of your, you know, former fellow employees that may still be there, kind of in the mix. So.
Yes, I know. I didn't realize it was going to take so much time. I have so
You're
much more
good.
to say,
You're
but
good. You're
I
good.
know we all got to.
And if somebody has questions, that brings a good point. So if somebody wants to know more, maybe can they reach out to you? I know you talked about a book coming out.
Yes, I'm working on a book called Uncuffing the Truth. And it's just basically my story about working at the
Nice.
prison. So yeah, that's on Instagram.
So I think our podcast today is a series of maybe multiple series with you because we're uncovering it and we're
Yeah.
peeling that
Yes.
layer
Yeah.
one layer at a time. So
Yeah.
we just wanted to make sure people understand the context of what we're talking about, which is California SB 132.
Correct.
Yes.
Now we're going to dive into that book, Uncuffing the Truth,
Yes.
and we're going to go ahead
Yeah.
and start peeling that even further on what correction officers go through on a day-to-day
Yes.
life, and then maybe you can expose some of that so that people understand what's really going on. Because I work with some correction officers when I do the financing for their mortgages,
That's true,
and
yeah.
frankly, they work a lot of hours, and
Yes.
some of them are very stressed. I do
Yes,
some of their
they do.
taxes too, and I tell you what, they have their stories, and some of them are very reserved. And
Yep.
some of them will tell me once they're retired, I
done.
don't want my kids to go through that,
Oh, yeah.
right? And I wonder,
For
but
sure.
that's a great paying job. Why wouldn't
It
you
is.
want that? That's a good job. And then this is where you're and again, I'll quote, uncuffing the truth. And again, we'll go through this in a series. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you coming again, being brave and bringing this
Thank you.
up. We look forward to seeing you again. This isn't the first series, so whatever you didn't get a chance to say today, we'll do it
Okay,
again.
well, thank you.